Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the OAMLP alumni webinar, Leading When There Is No Map. It's great to see so many familiar faces from across our alumni community. This webinar series is special. It's designed to keep you connected with Oxford insights and give you practical tools for your leadership journey. I'm Patricia Alvarez, and I'm a program sales manager here at Said Business School. I've been part of the school for 3 years and also part of OAMLP. So I know many of you from these recent cohorts, and it's great, and I'm thrilled to see you here. For those I haven't met, welcome as well. Today, we're going to start with me and an introduction, and then I'm going to pass over to Sally, who will touch on our topic today of leading when there is no map. But before we dive in, here are some exciting updates from our OAMLP program. We have been working hard this year for the program and to give it a refresh and a new face. So I'm very excited to introduce our new team of faculty. We have our academic director, Athol Williams, who is the academic director on both of the cohorts, residential and blended, and he will be there to ensure that the program has the rigorous expert that you expect from Oxford. As program director in our residential program, we have Sally Bonneywell. And then as our program director for our blended, we have Louise Watts. We also have a new format for the program. I know many of you might have seen this, but we have launched a very new blended option. So it's the same program that you all did and you all know, but with a new blended format to give more flexibility to those who need it. And as a last update from us, we've got a lot of new opportunities to connect with you as our community. We would be doing more of these webinars. We are preparing some alumni reunions, and we also have a new referral scheme for you to help us spread the word and widen the community. So please connect with us. Here are all of us, the new team, the new faculty. You can see their faces. You can follow them on LinkedIn, and the same with us, the recruitment team. On the right-hand side, you have our LinkedIn links, and you can connect with us and watch the space. So now, before we dive in, how to get the most of this webinar, participate. We encourage you to submit your questions, and you can also do that in the Q&A. We want to know who's in the room. It'll be very exciting to see where you're coming from, who you are, and also your cohort. So put your cohort and type of year in the chat, and then we will know who's here with us. We want you to have one takeaway as well, very important. So at least use something that you are learning today and apply it as soon as possible. Now, without any more delay, I'm very happy to introduce Sally. Sally is an associate fellow here in the business school and the OAMLP director. She brings over 25 years of experience as a program director, designer, coach, and facilitator across industries, including professional services, pharmaceutical, manufacturing, and government. Previously VP of Leadership and Organization Development at GSK, Sally specializes in creating innovative interventions that enable leaders to step up into enterprise thinking and expand strategic decision-making capability. Sally will now take us through today's topic, Leading When There Is No Map. Over to you, Sally.
Thank you, Patricia, very much. And I'm delighted to be here. And I'm just looking at the chat to see, it's so lovely. Please put in which cohort you're in and where you're coming from. It's lovely. Part of the reason for doing these webinars is to enable you to connect. So let's see if everyone can fill out the never had. Hello, good to see you. Wow, from Nigeria. Hello, Peter, Maria. I can see you saying hello to everybody else. Eric, welcome from 2014. Wow, fantastic. 2015, Mikhail in Trinidad. Great. Gosh, what a lovely place to be today. It's Petruta, Alfonso, Angela. Lovely to see you again, Angela. And Casey. Wow, hi, Casey. Felicia, 2023, 2021. Ronnie, great. Lovely. It's so nice. 2019, Yasso. Demetris, 2024 from Brussels. Fantastic. Thank you. It's so lovely to see you all connecting again, not just with us, but with each other, because we do like to think that when you go through OAMLP, it's not just for those 3 weeks or the sort of the following coaching sessions afterwards. It's very much on an ongoing basis. You know, you're connected to us, but connected to each other as well. So really do use the chat to connect, reconnect with everybody, and to connect with new people, because it's all about, as I'm sure you covered on your program, it's about our networks and how we use and leverage those networks as well. So I'm delighted to see you. Delighted to see some of the people who I've just been working with on the previous on our previous program, which finished only 2 weeks ago. Teresa, hello, Teresa. So let's go back to the objectives here. So the first one, we can do a big tick. We connect with alumni from previous cohorts. So we've been able to do that. What we're also going to do is explore the practice of leadership. We're going to look at and learn, and you may well know it already, but maybe it'll be a reminder or something new about a process to help you to diagnose complex, ambiguous issues that you are facing in your organization or that your organization is facing. We're going to identify options then of how to lead in and how to lead change in these situations. And we're going to I'm going to encourage you to apply the concepts to a real life situation. So for you to think about your own particular situation, your own challenges that you face, so you can make that transition from being conceptual ideas and theories to your own practical challenges. Thank you, Patricia. Next slide, please. So this is what we're going to do. We're doing the check-in and welcome now. We're going to then run through some concepts. You can see them here. And I'll go through these with examples and we'll help think about, and I'll give you some questions to think about and encourage you to write some responses in the chat. And then we'll pull it all together and we'll stop about 1/4 to the hour so that you have a chance for questions and ask any questions you like. We'll see how I respond and we'll see what other people think to those questions as well. So if that sounds like something you want to do, I'm delighted. And if not, I won't be offended if you think, actually, this isn't for me and you leave now. But I'd rather you knew what we were going to do. So next slide, please, Patricia. So the first one, and there's quite a few builds here, Patricia. So we're going to look at the practice of leadership. And by this, we mean leadership as a verb, so an active doing word. It's an activity that we're going to look at. So we're looking at what it is. What is it that we do when we're doing, I'm doing quotation marks here, leadership work. So what are we actually doing when we say we're leading, when we're doing leadership work? And this is about doing it with or without the formal authority or position. So whether or not we have the title that gives us that formal authority. So it's whether we have that or when we don't, what does it mean we're doing? So it might be about setting a direction, guiding others, making decisions, or about creating a holding environment where other people can do the work that we need them to do. So essentially, we're talking this morning about leadership being about what you do, not who you are. So we're not talking about the capabilities, the personality traits, or the characteristics of leadership. What we're talking about here this morning, the practice of leadership. So we're taking a different slice, a different lens on leadership than maybe we do at other times. Thank you. So, what's different about the context? And this is not going to be a surprise to you, but looking at the context that we're all in at the moment, we can see very much that it's a VUCA context. So, Patricia, Bill, thank you. So, we know what that means: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And the next build. So this quote really, for me, summed it up. And it's from Forbes, and it's just this year, just a couple of months ago. Our indicator-based analysis found that since 2019, the rate of change affecting businesses across 6 key areas: technology, talent, economic, geopolitical, climate, and consumer and social, has risen sharply by 183% over the past 4 years and by 33% in this past year alone. So it's exponential rate of change in all of these key areas, all of which impact us at any one time. Next build. So from a leadership perspective, what worked before will not necessarily work now. And that's where we're inviting you to think about, what might I need to change, or what other slice of leadership lens might I need to extend? Might I need to look at things through in order to cope with, and not just cope with, but to thrive in this time of complex, ambiguous change? Excuse me. Now, Ron Heifetz, I hate to say he's from Harvard, but he is from Harvard. His adaptive leadership perspective is one aspect of which we're talking about today. And his definition here is about guiding groups to confront complex challenges that necessitate a shift in fundamental beliefs, values, and sometimes identities. It addresses significant issues that cannot be solved with simple or technical solutions. We'll come on to that bit in a minute, but first, the bit I want to pause on here, it's about when we lead in this way and when we're leading in these complex, ambiguous situations, the important point here is necessitate a shift in fundamental beliefs, values, and sometimes identities, which requires us to be conscious of what are our beliefs, what are our values, and what identity are we holding at the moment in terms of our leadership, in terms of how we do leadership. So pausing and thinking and becoming really clear about, how might I be entering a particular situation? What might I be holding in terms of my beliefs? Some of which might be helpful and some of which might be limiting. And are they appropriate for the situation that I find myself in at the moment? And that ability to move and change is the thing that's important. Now, one of the key things that we found is that one of the key traps is the misdiagnosis trap. That unless we pay attention to how we're coming into a situation, we can often find that we treat all problems and issues in a similar way. And these might be technical issues, or they might be adaptive issues. Now, making a distinction between the two is really important. Now, adaptive is also sometimes known in other methodologies and other perspectives as complex problems or wicked problems. Let's look at some examples. So technical problems, for example, in finance, an issue might be the financial accounts are late being produced. Or within HR, you need to hire new staff or design a fit for purpose compensation scheme, something where you have to address a technical issue or technical problem, but you know roughly what needs to be done. And it's not necessarily saying these are simple problems, far from it, because another example is that, a patient requires complex surgery, but the doctors and surgeons know what they've got to do. So the problem can be complex, but the knowing what it is and knowing what the solutions are and knowing what the outcome you need is would classify it as a technical problem. So another data or IT focused example there, where you need to change systems and update the system. And there's a lot of things to consider, but fundamentally, you know exactly what's got to be done. It's just a question of doing it. On the other hand, adaptive challenges are much more complex in that it's about not necessarily knowing what the problem is and definitely not knowing what the solution is. So, for example, I don't know if any of you have been through the pain, I'll say that, having from personal experience, the pain of introducing a shared service model in an organization. You can understand exactly the logic of why it's being done and all of the arguments. However, the challenge of introducing a shared service model across an organization is complex, and there's so many moving parts. And what works in one part of an organization doesn't necessarily work in another part of the organization. It's the same with restructuring. There are things and people and stakeholders to be involved that come out of the woodwork somehow when you start doing complex changes like restructuring. And even what on the surface appear to be simple issues, moving locations, when you really dig down into them, they suddenly become complex because of the amount of change, the amount of beliefs that go along with, and the values that are associated with things like letting go of the identity that goes with operating or working from one particular location and moving to another. Far more complex than we would usually think about. When you're addressing conflicts, if they're long-standing, lots of politics involved, that often requires a different lens. Merging two organizations, Patricia said, I spent 20 years at GlaxoSmithKline, and even the big merger between Glaxo Wellcome and SmithKline Beecham in the early 2000s, that was hugely complex from many different angles, but particularly because on the surface, the two organizations, the values that were the espoused values of both organizations, there was an 80% overlap in terms of the values. But when it actually came to it, there were huge cultural differences between the two organizations. And it was those cultural differences that required time and effort to understand and to lead and to pay attention to, because they were the things that either helped or hindered the merger of the two organizations in an effective way. Things like responding to the global crisis of COVID. No one really, if we think back to it, it was 5 years ago, but if we think back to it, we didn't really know what we were dealing with. We didn't know what the potential causes were or the potential solutions were. And that was a classic adaptive challenge. And implementing new technologies. And one, I was facilitating an impact group just last week. And the mindset shift was phenomenal, because the issue that was brought up was, how can we get more people to use AI in their work, which I had never heard before. So we all know about AI, we all know about adopting it, about using it, and so on. But that was actually brought as a, how can we get people to use it more? And that new technology and the issues that that will bring up, and the complexities in terms of how we lead, what are all the aspects of that, that really is an adaptive challenge. So understanding, taking the time to really understand what's the issue we're really dealing with when we talk about leading change. So if we have, well, this little grid can help us here. Because if we look at the technical problems, if we think about what's the problem, with technical problems, the problem's recognizable. So we know what it is. We're able to define it, we're able to put boundaries around it, and we know what it is. With adaptive challenges, they're unfamiliar or unknown. We don't exactly know the shape of them. We don't know necessarily where the edges are. We don't know where the boundaries are. The solution with technical problems are known. We know exactly what we've got to do. It might be difficult, it might be challenging, it might be long term, but we know what the solutions are. With adaptive challenges, they're unknown and they require learning as you go through, as people work on the adaptive challenge. They have to learn their way through it. I'm not going to say learn their way to solving it, because with adaptive challenge, it's not a question of solving it. It's about working with it and working through the journey of it. And what's the work? With technical problems, it's applying current know-how. So applying what we know, expertise to the issue. And with adaptive challenges, it's about learning new ways of working. And who does the work? With technical problems, it's experts, those people with the experience and the expertise to be able to solve the issues. With adaptive challenges, it's all of the people or representatives of all of the people or the stakeholders with the problem. Okay, Patricia, thank you. So my example here, if you could move, thank you. In GSK lacked female leaders at very senior levels. Not an unusual situation, I know, but leaders were getting stuck. Female leaders were getting stuck at the vice president level, at the director level, then the vice president level. And there very few were making it through to the senior vice president level. So talent, capability, and the difference that female leaders bring were being wasted, and it was not in alignment with the organization's values nor mine. So we'll come back to this example a bit later. As you can see, my case fitted adaptive challenges here. So it was very clearly an adaptive challenge. Thank you. So I'd encourage you now to think about examples of the challenges that I'm sure you are already thinking about, challenges that you or your team are currently facing. And if you applied the diagnostic framework, are they technical problems or are there some adaptive challenges? And if so, what are some examples of adaptive challenges? So just make a note and we'll come back to this at the end when we open up for questions. Patricia. So diagnosis becomes a key part, because without diagnosis, and yes, the next build, please, we'll get the wrong prescription. So unless we take the time to really think about and understand what's the issue, what's the type of issue we're facing, we'll put the wrong prescription. We might give drugs instead of surgery. We might bring in, thank you. So taking the time to diagnose. Adaptive challenges require people to learn and change. And often solutions that are imposed from above, if the diagnosis isn't done correctly, and if an adaptive challenge is misdiagnosed as a technical challenge and solutions are imposed from senior leaders, that creates resistance because it doesn't address the real issues. It's imposing a solution, and that sets up resistance. And real progress needs the engagement and the involvement of the people who are involved, the stakeholders who are involved in the issue. So the perspective, another tool here is, you've probably heard this one already, but it's saying, let's look at things from a dance floor and from a balcony perspective. So we need the dance floor perspective because we need to be understanding what's going on. And that dance floor will look different from depending on where you are, but you need to be knowing what's going on. But in order to take a systems level approach or get some perspective on the issue, going up onto the balcony and looking down at the dance floor you can see then that some people here, particularly the women around the in the white dress, are having a great time. But in the corner over by the bar, there's a few people sitting alone. And in the far corner, there's a fight brewing. So unless you take that balcony perspective, you can't really see the whole system. And so that ability to move to know when to go up onto the balcony and look down at the dance floor, but then knowing when you need to go back to the dance floor and delve into the specifics. Yeah, dance floor equals shop floor. Could well, absolutely. Thanks, Gulshan. Could well be that. So that movement between the two is a key skill and capability that we need to build, particularly in complex situations here. Thank you. So we're going to reframe change, and there are two cartoons here just to lighten, really. A simple model, but it works for me. Yes, let's go from here to there. And most people think that success is easy and straight line, but it's not. It's often a wiggly path, and accepting that and reframing it is important. Next slide, please. So a common misconception about change is that people don't like change. We think it's a misconception because when you have a new baby, people are delighted. Or if you win the lottery, again, not many people give winning lottery tickets back. So change, people do like change if it suits their values and if it's something they want. But where change causes issues, next slide, please, is when it equals loss. And this loss may be a loss of identity if we feel we're going to lose that essence of who we are, that our unique identity, and we're going to be lumped in with everybody else. That's when we can start to resist change. Status, if we fear that our status is being threatened and for some reason we will lose status, that's when change is not welcome. If we lose a sense of belonging when work groups or teams, close-knit teams particularly, are disbanded, or when factories close and the factories created, or any of it, or any team, it creates a sense of belonging. That change is something that will be resisted because it's a loss. Or when our authenticity is questioned, or when we have to try and become someone else and we don't feel authentic in those new roles or what's being asked from us, that's when it's the loss that people react to. It's the loss that's important. Next slide. And this quote from Ron Heifetz is at one level completely dispiriting and at another so useful to understand. He says, leadership is about disappointing people at a rate they can absorb. When I first heard this, I was like, oh gosh, shall I slit my wrists now? It was like, oh, that's so pessimistic. And then when I really started to study this area, this frame of reference, and it started to make an awful lot of sense. It's about how we create a holding environment and how we can do that. How we do that makes a huge difference to people as to whether or not that change can be successful, that change can be welcomed, or that change can be tolerated. Because change, as we know, is inevitable and it will keep coming. And the old concept that, oh well, we've got that change done, that's great, tick, we'll get back to normal, is a fallacy, and it doesn't happen. And more often it's about waves upon waves upon waves of change. And it's about how can we as leaders support people through this as a way of working now, a way of operating. And the more we can do to create holding environments that enable people to manage themselves and manage their losses, their perceived losses, so that they can function and function well moving forward is the key to be able to be leaders and to do leadership work that's going to be useful and that's going to be effective. So another reflective question. Think about the examples of losses that you've experienced due to organizational changes. And then think about how did the approach of your organization's leaders, did their approach, did it help or hinder the loss for you? Did it exacerbate or did it help you? So just make a few notes thinking about the losses through organizational change that you personally have experienced. And obviously most likely you will jump as well to oh gosh, as a leader, how have I either helped people through losses or have I hindered the loss for people in my team or my organization? Okay, Patricia, let's move on to the next one. So one way of helping and supporting here is about thinking through whose change is it and what do they think they're losing? And I'm just thinking back to when you go through things like this, we think about examples for ourselves, and I think about a situation at GSK when we had a restructuring and we moved my department from one part of the organization because it originally started in EHS, Employee Health and Safety, and moved into talent and leadership development. And on the face of it, it was quite simple, but fundamentally, it was a big loss of identity, not a huge loss of identity, and a big shift. And I cringe when I think about how I led that change, and I think about how I didn't really support what people were losing because I was applying a bit of a pace-setting approach to leadership. I didn't take the time to really think about how can I support, what losses are they really facing, and how do I support them in that? So it might be individuals, it might be groups of people, it might be different stakeholders with different needs. They might be internal stakeholders, external stakeholders, or they might be factions. And by factions, what I mean by that is people who have got something in common, which might sit across a group of stakeholders, but the faction themselves take a perspective on that change or on that loss. So if we go to the next one, please, Patricia. So one of the key tools that we found to be really helpful here is actually to map the parts of the adaptive challenge. So identify, first of all, who are the stakeholders involved here? So who are the broad groups of people who may be impacted by the issue? These might be internal customers, it might be suppliers, it might be direct reports, it might be bosses, it might be peers, it might be people who've got a vested interest. And then to think about within those stakeholders and that within those large groups of stakeholders, who are the factions? Can you identify the factions? So groups of people with similar viewpoints about the issue in hand. And then think about, well, what are the losses that this faction are facing? And what does that faction want or need? And one of the key things that we found to be particularly useful is putting the adaptive challenge, so putting the work at the center of the map. So rather than having it as being owned by or seen as any one of the faction's issues, so it's not my issue, it's not Patricia's issue, it's not the teacher's issue, it's not the direct reports issue. No, it's our issue at the center of the challenge and then think about, well, what is it? What do the different factions? So it might be closing down a factory, putting that at the center. It might be, and then identifying the unions, identifying people who don't want it to happen, or identifying people who actually do want because it solves some other needs for them. If we move to the next one, I can give you the examples here. So if you do a build, please. And the next build. Thank you. So my adaptive challenge, the why, it was because it was important to me that female leaders got to very senior levels and they were getting stuck. So we examined why that was happening. So when I looked at the key stakeholders, I could see that the employees were key people. They're both men and women. Line managers were other stakeholders. The corporate executive team and the board were another group of stakeholders. The government and the NGOs were also stakeholders. You might think, how come? Well, the GSK has a lot of relationships with the UK government, but with other NGOs, with NGOs as well, because of the influence on the UK industry and global industry as well. There were specialists, so not just within GSK, but outside, who had a vested interest in more leaders being female at senior levels. Other minority groups were stakeholders, as well as the corporate HR functions, who were concerned about the metrics, who were also concerned about the culture of the organization and how it operated. So if we then split that down into factions, now, Mikhail, great observation. Every faction has a different story about the same problem. Leadership is stitching those stories. Yes, it is. Absolutely. It's about understanding those different stories and appreciating them. And that's, I think, what we're saying here. So going back to the example here. So the factions, there were women who wanted the option of having a full career. Now, if we just left it as women leaders or female leaders, not every female leader wanted to get to the very top of the organization. I did some diagnosis and asked some female leaders what was stopping them getting to the top. And one woman, I'll never forget her, she said, I've looked up and seen the extreme art or the extreme sport of being a top executive, and I don't want it. So some women were actively opting not to go for the senior levels, but there was a lot of things that were getting in the way of them not going there. But it was the women, the faction of the women who wanted to progress up was one faction. There was the leadership who wanted to see the difference that female leaders brought at senior levels. Not all leadership, but some leadership really wanted that women at the wanted change and wanted female leaders at the top level. Then there was the old guard who didn't want any change in the status quo. They were very happy with things being exactly as they were and didn't see an issue and didn't want things to change. And then there were the line managers who didn't honestly care whether it was male, female, or anything else. They just wanted to fill the roles at senior levels because they were very hard, very specialist roles, and they wanted leadership to fill those roles. So by putting the issue in the center and by identifying the factions, we were then able to say, and so what can we do for those different factions? And next slide, please, Patricia. But we know that leadership is about moving people from the past through the present and with an eye on the future. So mapping out a timeline is a really useful tool to use. So next slide, please. And build, please. So this timeline, I mapped the timeline for this challenge. So the issue was the talent said that only 18% of senior vice presidents were female. This had been going on for years, and it wasn't an issue, supposedly an issue, until the chairman was appointed the Women on Boards czar for the UK government. That prompted sort of attention to be paid for GSK. And that's when we initiated the Accelerating Difference program that we did. And we did a number of different things. We did sponsorship, we did coaching at an individual and group level, and we did dialogues where we talked with male and female leaders about careers in GSK. We managed to get internal alignment from the different factions about what we should do, and the cohort started. And it went on, and we won the different prizes and awards for it because it really made a difference. But the thing for me that was the best validation of the work that was done was global manufacturing and supply, the site director role, always traditionally highly male dominated. And they got to 50-50, male and female. And that was a validation of taking this systems approach, looking at this as an adaptive challenge and working with the different factions to help bring not resolution, but help to manage the situation. Next slide, please. You'll have to build a couple, that's it, and then move on. So managing and mapping the losses and the loyalties that we had to give up was really important. So we had to manage the women, their identity and choice, because the women, majority of them said, I want to be promoted on merit, not just because I'm a woman. The men, we had to manage the promotion opportunities and the expectations. The line managers didn't always welcome this. They said, I want free choice. I want to be able to choose. No one's telling me who I can hire. And it was through discussion and through them working through this issue and having conversations. As you can see there, the other minority groups said, well, what about us? Why are women special? So working with other minority groups to say, and what can we do? What do you need? What are the losses that you're facing? How do we support you? So next slide, please. And who can demonstrate leadership? This is coming back to one of my earlier points about leadership can be demonstrated not just at very senior levels of formal authority, not just because you've got a title. So we found that there were people within the system who didn't have senior positions, but who were absolutely showing leadership here. The high potential women were the ones who were really grabbed onto this and demonstrated leadership. We looked for the referent leaders amongst the men. So who were the movers and shakers? Who are the ones that other people looked to? So we engaged, we enrolled them, we had conversations with them. The business unit leaders and the program leaders of the key hot areas for the organization, and where there was hard to find people, we worked with them, and they demonstrated leadership and caused change. And other functions, recruitment and talent management, became absolutely crucial. They moved forward on this far faster than other areas of the system. They were all demonstrating leadership. But if we just said it's the senior leaders, nothing would have changed. Next slide, please. So if we pull all of that together, and I've kind of rattled through something that you can easily do a week-long course or week-long program on. Key things here, the importance of diagnosing your challenge. Is it adaptive? And adaptive challenges often may contain some technical problems, but what's the adaptive challenge here? And why does it matter to you? What is it about it that's important to you? Establishing that is crucial so you can speak from the heart and speak authentically about it. What's the context? So drawing the timeline of where are you coming from and where are you going? What's the past? So literally drawing the timeline can be really useful. What are the key events that have caused it to be like it is? And what are the things that are happening at the time? And where do you think you're going, even if it's in the general rather than specifics? And who do you need to get involved? So identifying the stakeholders and the factions, because getting them involved, enrolling them in conversations, in how do we work through this? What are the definitions here? Involving the key stakeholders, so anyone who has got some input or involved in this. What's at stake? Really helping and not just guessing at, but helping people to identify and manage the losses. So what is it really that you're going to lose? Identify that, and then people can work with it rather than having a very generalized sense of resistance. Then think about who can demonstrate leadership. Where do you need to look for that? Where might you need to encourage, or who do you need to listen to? There's another phrase here that I haven't put on, but it's dancing with the ugly dancers. The people who are challenging the system already know something isn't working and needs to be different. We tend to go along with the people who are compliant and operating the system smoothly. But in this approach, it's looking for the ones who are bucking the system, the ones who are fighting against the system, because they know that something isn't working and think there might be something better or different way of doing things. Paying attention to that. They might not be right, but they're useful to talk to and to listen to. And a key shift is from having answers to asking questions. So when you're leading this change, it's about asking the questions. It's about not solving problems, but enabling others to solve them. So I'm going to pause there. I've rattled through that. I believe we have Angela present today. And are we able to unmute Angela? Angela, can I invite you to just talk? You've got an example of applying this methodology to an adaptive challenge that you're going to share. Is that okay? I can't hear. Angela, are you off mute?
Yes. Hi, everybody. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. No, thank you, Sally. And it was really, really nice to listen the lecture on to reflecting on the adaptive challenge. During the course, we actually I kind of separated the issues in two parts on the adaptive challenge that I was facing inside the organization and the adaptive challenge I was facing outside the organization. So in my case, the adaptive challenge was to roll out a new strategy and a result impact framework, which would we are currently working on a research organization as a public institution, but with a kind of with a specific business model, and they need to demonstrate the taxpayer value. And there has been a shrink in the sector in terms of funding. So there's quite a lot of scrutiny about what it is that is how the funding of research is being used. So we had to sort of try to roll out a new strategy, which will articulate more clearly what we do. And the organization has been, it's what we would consider quite innovative, fragmented group of experts and innovators that suddenly had to start to work more as a cohesive organization that works towards a coordinated sort of impact, outcome, and impact. So we are in the process of restructuring, and in that process also to integrate a kind of a way in which we collate the results across. So that's kind of an adaptive challenge in the sense that it requires everybody to join in on the effort. There is resistance because there's a lot of staff that has been in the organization for a long time, and they don't see the logic of moving with a different narrative. So it has been interesting to unpack the role that everybody had on the specific on the journey. We are on the making of the process, so we are still in the adaptive challenge, and as you said, it's a collective process. Externally, the other work I do is try to influence policy on climate and health. And as you might have witnessed on the latest COP conference of the party that concluded a few days ago, also that is an adaptive challenge. So how we support country to strengthen the work on climate at national level, and how we change system, how we make we make government or system or company to commit to a net zero, because that will have a long-term impact on emission, and how we adapt today in terms of how we reduce the exposure on the health impact. So again, is that kind of maybe is a much more complex adaptive challenge to unravel, but it's who do you work with, who do you lobby in terms of the government and the various national stakeholders to make progress at the national level, and how you make sure that there is a coordination with global sort of stakeholders as well. So that's kind of the external adaptive challenge. I would just, I don't know if that is enough, Sally, for explaining. I can unpack more.
Oh, I think that's great. Thank you. And just maybe one or two lines on how you think that this framework is useful, is helping you to think about these these complex adaptive challenges.
It's actually, it made me reflect more about my skill and technical journey, because I come from a quite academic background, and I always approach issues as a technical issue, and kind of to unpack the various things that can be done to unravel and resolve the complex problem. And what is clear that it needs to be taken more as a holistic, more broader perspective, where actually the solution has to be found with the time that it requires with the broadest perspective of stakeholders. And so it made me reflect about how almost like to remove the baggage that I have on preconditioning on what needs to be done in terms of resolving it. And actually it made me think about how I lead and how I project myself on the work that I do and the experience I have. So it's been an interesting kind of lens in which I then reflected on myself and my skill and what next on a broader perspective.
Great. Thank you, Angela, for explaining that. And I think I know you're going to be busy from now on with COP and others. So thank you for taking those challenges and for working with the stakeholders, with the factions, and for explaining that. Really, really helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We have a question from Hui Fan, which says, just asking how you identify the factions. It's a great question. And to be honest, I think it's trial and error. I think you have to go with your gut, but you also have to ask people and start listening really well, really listening to, you'll have an idea about stakeholders, but you'll only start to understand the factions by talking to the stakeholders, by listening to the stakeholders, by listening to their concerns. And that's when you can work out the nuances of who has got a view and a perspective on something. And they won't be static. They may shift and move and change. And there's a temptation to break them down into further and further gradations. And you might have to do that on some issues, but that agility to then say, no, I'm going to address this faction overall, or address the faction, or work or understand what this faction wants in general, and then there'll be specifics that people want. So I think it's trial and error, but great question. Thank you, Hugh. What other questions? Please type in any questions into the chat or into the Q&A, and we can address those if you've got any questions. I would say there's a fantastic TED talk by someone called Farai Chipungo, she talks through and gives examples for adaptive leadership. She's a wonderful speaker on TED Talk, so it's well worth looking at her TED Talk. I'd really encourage you to do that. It's a great methodology, and the Ron Heifetz and Marty Linsky book on adaptive leadership, the art and practice of adaptive leadership, is worth a good read as well. So, other questions? Oh, I stunned you all into silence here. And yes, we will share the presentation slides. Very happy for you to have a copy of the slides, of course, as usual at all of our Always have that. Oh, I like that. That's a Mikhail, great question. What's the question we haven't yet asked but must? Great question. Um, I think this approach, this methodology, is not for the faint-hearted, because you have to be willing to and able to bear ambiguity. And so it requires self-knowledge, it requires self-leadership, it requires the ability to handle yourself in ambiguous situations and to be prepared to, I was going to use the word term fight, but I don't mean fight. It's hold yourself steady in ambiguous situations. That's a really important thing to be able to do. So asking yourself, am I fit for this type of leadership, activity, this practice of leadership? And of course, I wouldn't be here now talking to you if I didn't believe it was absolutely crucial and one of the most important skills and capabilities and lenses to take moving forward with the rate of change. I personally don't see, I think I wouldn't even think about leading change without taking this approach. Oh, thank you, Yaso. Blessing, thank you, Osai. And yes, you're right. Blessing, the whole art of leadership is surely not for the faint-hearted. I agree, it's not. And sometimes I'm sure, like like me, you wonder, why do I do it? But it's, you must, because the world needs leaders, and better leaders make better business, better organizations, better societies. That's why you're here today. So thank you. Yes, oh gosh, dis and misinformation, absolutely. How do we cope in those situations and how do we deal with the ambiguity that throws up? Absolutely. Great questions, great involvement. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll bring it to a close now, but I'll hand over to Patricia to do that. But thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you this morning.
Thank you so much, Sally. Thank you so much, Angela. Everyone is great. Like I said at the beginning, not see, but read so many familiar faces. A couple of people had their hands up.
Oh,
I don't know if they still want to share something. I know Never Had was one of them.
I'm so sorry. I didn't see any raised hands. So yes, please.
So I just unmute them then. Let me just.
Yeah, please do.
Sorry, it's just not, I can't see her now. I think Never Had is gone.
Oh, right.
Oh
Okay, well, we
no.
won't do that now. I'm so sorry if we missed you.
Oh no, sorry, it's here. Sorry. Yeah.
All right, okay, Never Had. Great.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes, we
yeah, we
can.
can.
Well, lovely to join, and thank you so much, all of you, and especially both of you. We've met very recently. I'm conscious we're running out of time, so we may want to come back to this on a later point. But actually, I mean, I do realize fully that almost, if not all of my challenges are adaptive ones. Amidst the geopolitical, the power market situation, a lot of complexities here in the Baltics and the Nordics. And I was going to say, if you're in a position where you lead others who need to lead adaptive challenges and solve them or address them. So any advice on that? But I think we just have to come back to that question.
Yeah, except I would say Never Had is education. It's the putting things on the table. It's having these kind of conversations that enable people to see it differently and enroll people in thinking differently about it. So engaging and enrolling those leaders, you can't do it on your own. So that's what I would say is whether you use this presentation or other, your own notes, and take them through the process yourselves with them so that they can do it with their teams and back them up, support them.
Thank you. And that's indeed promised to myself to use the materials to go through these with my teams. So thank you very much, Sally and Athol and others.
Yeah, thank you so much, Never Had.
Thank
And
you.
we've got 1 minute left. I know Golsham has her hand up as well. Golsham, can you I think you're on mute now. Hello?
Hi. Good
Hi,
Hi.
Gulshan.
morning, everybody.
Morning. Great to see the current cohort so active.
Yeah, so it's a pleasure to have this, and it was like a deja vu moment for us because it's very fresh. We have gone through this process.
Great. I hope it was useful. I hope you started applying this already, Gulshan.
Absolutely, we are working on it, and it is very helpful to identify, deconstruct, the problems, and then look for the solution. So, as you said, the diagnosis, where we call it as a deconstructing, identifying and deconstructing the problem, and then looking for the solution. So it's very
Great.
helpful, and we are very, joyed, and when after returning from Oxford, so we are a different people, as promised by you.
Thank you, Gulshan.
Thank
They
you so
were
much.
really helpful. Lovely to see you.
Well, great to see everybody. Thank you so much for attending. And yeah, we'll preparing a lot of exciting events online and in person to reconnect with all of you next year. So we'll be in touch very soon. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye bye for now.